I always thought the worst thing that could happen to me was being forgotten. But I was wrong. The worst thing is realizing you were never really seen in the first place. That's how it started. The day I found out my sister was getting married. Not from a phone call, not from an invitation, but from a photo on my phone, glowing in the late afternoon sun, as if the universe wanted to spotlight my exclusion. I'd just come home from a long day, restoring the old Whitaker house on 12th. My hands were still stained with varnish, my back aching in that satisfying way that only comes from honest work. I kicked off my boots, poured myself a glass of red, and collapsed into my favorite chair, ready to let the silence of my apartment wash over me. My phone buzzed, but I ignored it at first. I wanted a moment to myself. A moment to feel like I belonged somewhere, even if it was just in my own living room. But the buzzing didn't stop. It kept going, insistent, like a mosquito in the dark. Finally, I reached for it, thumbed through the notifications, and there it was. A photo of my sister, Lila, in a white dress, her face half hidden by a veil. Her smile so wide it almost looked real. The caption read, "Final fitting for the big day. Lila and Ben. Forever starts now." My heart stuttered. I scrolled, desperate for context, for some sign that this was a joke, a prank, anything but what it was. But the evidence was everywhere. Photos of bridesmaids, flower samples, my mother's hands arranging invitations, comments from cousins, friends, people I hadn't seen since high school, all gushing about how excited they were for the wedding. A wedding I hadn't been invited to. I sat there, staring at my phone, the world narrowing to a single sharp point. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe the invitation got lost. Maybe they were planning a surprise. But deep down, I knew. I'd always been the responsible one, the fixer, the one who showed up when no one else would. But I was never the favorite, never the one they celebrated. I was the safety net, invisible until someone needed saving. My phone rang, jolting me out of my spiral. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button. I already knew what she'd say, how she'd sound. Measured, careful, as if she were talking to a child on the verge of a tantrum. I answered anyway. "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Anna, honey," she replied, her tone too bright, too rehearsed. "How's work?" I clenched my free hand, knuckles whitening. "Work is fine. I just saw Lila's wedding dress on Instagram." Silence. 3 heartbeats, maybe 4, then a sigh. The sound of a woman burdened by an unreasonable child. "Oh, I was going to call you about that. My own sister's wedding. Was my invitation lost?" She bristled, her voice sharpening. "Don't make this about you. You know how sensitive Lila is. Sensitive. That word again. As if my sister's feelings were a glass sculpture and mine were made of stone. What does that have to do with? You're always so busy with your career." Lila felt you wouldn't make time anyway. The room felt colder. I stood, moving to the window, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one. "So you all just decided not to invite me to my own sister's wedding?" "Ben thinks family is important," she said, as if that explained everything. "And I'm not family." The words scraped my throat. "Of course you are, but you know how things have been. After you criticized her bakery." I laughed, a bitter sound. "I co-signed her loan. $20,000 I paid back after she walked away from the business. She had the children to think about. Single motherhood isn't easy, Anna." I pressed my forehead to the glass. Old memories surfacing. Lila at 10, breaking grandma's vase. Me taking the blame. Lila at 17, sneaking out, me covering for her. Me at 16, announcing my scholarship. Mom's only comment. "Of course you got it. You're the responsible one." The responsible one. Always. "I haven't been forgotten, Mom," I whispered. I've been erased, she sighed again, the sound of resignation. We can talk about this later. I need to help Lila with the seating chart. The call ended. I stared at my phone, watching as new wedding posts appeared. Lila twirling in her dress, Ben and his groomsmen sampling cakes, my parents beaming beside the happy couple, a family portrait without me. Messages started rolling in. Jenna, my best friend since college. Did you see? Marcus from work. What the hell is going on with your family? Even Mrs. Henderson next door. Dear, are you aware of what's happening with your family? I sank back into my chair, the weight of 34 years pressing down on me. I'd built my life restoring forgotten places, bringing beauty back to what others had abandoned. But I couldn't restore my place in this family. That realization washed over me, cold and final. All these years, I'd been the fixer, the steady hand, the one who co-signed loans, babysat on demand, listened to midnight breakdowns. I'd shown up when no one else would. And this was my reward. Erasure. My phone buzzed again. I silenced it, set it face down on the table. From my window, I could see the mountains, their peaks burnished copper in the fading light. Beyond them, the town where my parents still lived, where Lila had returned with her kids after her divorce, where they were planning a wedding without me. Something shifted inside me. Not anger, not hurt, but something cooler, more deliberate. A quiet certainty. This time, I wouldn't fix what they'd broken. I picked up my phone and, with methodical precision, unfollowed my sister, then my mother, my father, my cousins. Each tap felt like setting down a burden I'd carried too long. This wasn't revenge. It was a decision, a boundary. As the last golden light faded from my windows, I sat in the gathering darkness, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to a silence so complete it felt like a verdict. No new messages, no missed calls, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I made coffee, staring out at the city as it woke up, people hurrying to jobs, to school, to lives that made sense. I wondered if any of them had ever felt as invisible as I did. I tried to distract myself with work. The Whitaker house was a mess of peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards, but I threw myself into it, letting the rhythm of sanding and scraping drown out the ache in my chest. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, half hoping, half dreading another message from someone who'd seen the latest wedding post. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the edge of town, to the old park where Lila and I used to play as kids. The swings were rusted, the slide faded, but the memories were sharp as ever. I sat on the bench, watching a young mother push her daughter on the swing, their laughter ringing out in the crisp air. I wondered if my mother had ever looked at me that way, with uncomplicated joy. My phone rang. Jenna, I answered, grateful for the distraction. Hey, she said, her voice gentle. How are you holding up? I hesitated. I don't know. I feel hollow, like I'm watching my life from the outside. She was quiet for a moment. You don't have to go through this alone, Anna. You know that, right? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I know, it's just, this isn't the first time. It's just the most obvious. Jenna sighed. Families are complicated, but this is cruel. I closed my eyes, letting her words settle. I keep thinking I did something wrong, that if I'd just been more, something, they would have wanted me there. Anna, you've always been the one holding everyone together. Maybe they just got used to you being there, no matter what. I wanted to believe her, but the hurt was too fresh, too raw. We talked for a while, about nothing and everything, until the sun dipped behind the trees, and the air turned cold. I promised to call her later, then sat in the quiet, letting the memories wash over me. I remembered Lila's first wedding, years ago. I was her maid of honor, the one who calmed her nerves, fixed her hair, made sure everything went smoothly. I remembered the way she clung to me after the ceremony, whispering, I couldn't have done this without you. I remembered thinking, maybe this is what family is supposed to feel like. But that was before the bakery, before the divorce, before I became the family's safety net. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a sister and started being a solution. I drove home as the sky turned purple, the city lights flickering on one by one. My apartment felt emptier than usual. I poured another glass of wine, sat by the window, and tried to imagine what the wedding would be like. Would they notice my absence? Would anyone ask where I was? I doubted it. The next day, I got a call from my father. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Anna," he said, his voice gruff. "Your mother says you're upset." I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "That's one way to put it," he sighed. "You know how your sister is. Sensitive. She didn't want any drama." "Drama," I repeated. "You mean, like not inviting your own daughter to a family wedding?" He was silent for a moment. "It's complicated. It always is," I said. "But it doesn't have to be." He changed the subject, asking about work, about the house I was restoring. I answered in monosyllables, unwilling to give him more than the bare minimum. When he hung up, I felt emptier than before. That night, I dreamed of the wedding. I saw Lila in her dress, my mother fussing over her, my father standing awkwardly in the corner. I saw myself outside, looking in through a window, unseen, unheard. I woke with tears on my cheeks. Days passed. The wedding drew closer. I tried to move on, to focus on my work, my friends, anything but the gaping hole where my family used to be. But the reminders were everywhere. Social media posts, texts from distant relatives, even the barista at my favorite coffee shop asking if I was excited for the big day. I started avoiding people, ducking into side streets, ignoring calls. I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need them, that I was better off alone. But the truth was, I was lonely, more lonely than I'd ever been. Then, 3 days before the wedding, Jenna called again. "Anna, you need to see this," she said, her voice urgent. She sent me a link, a video. I hesitated, then pressed play. It was footage from the rehearsal dinner. Lila and Ben, surrounded by friends and family, laughing, toasting, dancing. My mother beaming, my father clapping Ben on the back. Everyone looked so happy, so complete except me. I wasn't there. I wasn't even a footnote. I watched the video twice, then deleted it. I sat in the dark, the glow of my phone the only light in the room. I felt like a ghost, haunting a life that no longer belonged to me. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let them define me anymore. I wouldn't let their choices dictate my worth. I was done being the fixer, the afterthought, the invisible sister. I poured myself a final glass of wine, raised it in a silent toast to the woman I used to be, and promised myself that from now on, I would choose me. The morning of the wedding arrived with the sky so clear it felt almost mocking. Sunlight streamed through my window, painting golden stripes across the floor. I lay in bed for a long time, listening to the city wake up, the distant hum of traffic, the laughter of children on their way to the park. I wondered if Lila was nervous, if my mother was fussing over her hair, if my father was pacing the hallway, rehearsing his toast. I wondered if anyone noticed I wasn't there. I made coffee, moving through my apartment in slow motion. I tried to read, to work, to do anything but think about what was happening across town. But my mind kept drifting, circling back to the same questions, the same ache. I checked my phone, half expecting a last-minute message, an apology, an invitation. Nothing. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled on my sneakers and went for a walk, letting the rhythm of my steps steady my thoughts. The city was alive with weekend energy. Couples strolling hand in hand, kids chasing pigeons, street musicians filling the air with music. I let myself get lost in the crowd, invisible and anonymous, just another face in the city. I wandered into a bookstore, the kind with creaky floors and shelves that reached the ceiling. I ran my fingers over the spines, searching for something to anchor me. I found a novel about a woman who rebuilt her life after losing everything. I bought it, tucking it under my arm like a talisman. Back home, I curled up in my chair, the book open on my lap. But the words blurred together. My phone buzzed. A message from Jenna. Thinking of you today. Let me know if you want company. I smiled, grateful for her, for the way she always seemed to know what I needed before I did. I typed back, maybe later. I just need some time. The afternoon stretched on, slow and heavy. I tried to distract myself with chores, laundry, dishes, organizing the junk drawer. But nothing could fill the space left by my family's absence. I kept glancing at the clock, counting down the hours until the ceremony would be over, until the photos would be posted, until the world would move on. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marcus from work. Hey, just wanted to check in. If you need to talk, I'm here. I stared at the message, feeling a lump rise in my throat. I typed back, thanks, Marcus. I appreciate it. I set my phone aside, determined not to check social media, not to torture myself with images of a celebration I wasn't part of. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my new book, and tried to lose myself in someone else's story. But then, just as I was starting to relax, my phone buzzed again, and again, and again. The notifications came in a flood. Texts, calls, social media alerts. My heart pounded as I picked up my phone, dread coiling in my stomach. The first message was from Jenna. Anna, you need to see this. It's everywhere. I opened Instagram, my hands shaking. The first thing I saw was a video. Shaky, grainy. Clearly filmed on someone's phone. The caption read, OMG, can't believe this happened at Lila's wedding. I pressed play, my breath catching in my throat. The video showed the reception hall, glittering with fairy lights and white roses. Lila stood in the center of the dance floor, her dress pristine, her face radiant. Ben stood beside her, his arm around her waist. For a moment, everything looked perfect. Then the shouting started. The camera jerked, struggling to focus. Lila's voice, high and panicked. How could you do this to me? Ben's face twisted with anger. You set me up, he shouted, his voice cracking. You knew I was seeing someone else. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone tried to intervene, but Ben shoved them away. Then, in front of everyone, he raised his hand and slapped Lila across the face. The sound echoed through the hall, followed by stunned silence. The video ended in chaos. Guests screaming, someone calling for security, my mother rushing to Lila's side. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, my hands numb. More messages poured in. Jenna, are you okay? Marcus, I just saw the video. I'm so sorry. Even Mrs. Henderson. Dear, your family is on the news. Channel 7 is covering it. I switched on the TV, my hands shaking. The local news anchor was already reporting on the incident. A wedding at the historic Ridgewood Hall ended in violence today when the groom, Ben Carter, assaulted the bride in front of more than 100 guests. Police were called to the scene, and the groom was taken into custody. The bride, Lila Carter, was treated for minor injuries. I turned off the TV, the room spinning around me. I felt sick, horrified, and, if I was honest, a strange bitter sense of vindication. They hadn't wanted me there. They'd excluded me to avoid drama, to keep things simple. And now, their perfect day had become a public spectacle. But the vindication was fleeting, quickly swallowed by guilt and concern. No matter what had happened between us, Lila was still my sister. I couldn't help but worry about her, about what she must be feeling, about how she would pick up the pieces. My phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Anna, she sobbed, her voice raw. Lila's hurt. Please, can you come? I closed my eyes. The old reflex to fix, to help, to rush in and save them rising up inside me. But I remembered the months of silence, the exclusion, the way they'd made me feel invisible. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said quietly. "I don't think I can." She cried harder, begging me to come, to help, to be the daughter she needed. But I stood my ground, my voice steady. "You made your choice. Now I have to make mine." When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to fix someone else's mess. I wasn't sacrificing myself for a family that only remembered me when they needed something. I poured another glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker on. The world kept turning, indifferent to my family's drama, and for the first time, I let it. The days after the wedding unfolded in a blur of headlines, phone calls, and awkward silences. The video of Ben slapping Lila went viral, shared and reshared by strangers who didn't know us, who would never understand the years of tension and secrets that led to that moment. My family's pain became public property, dissected in comment sections and news segments, while I watched from the sidelines, both too close and too far away. I avoided the internet as much as I could, but it was impossible to escape completely. Even at the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering about that wedding video. At work, Marcus gave me a look of sympathy that said he'd seen it too. I wanted to disappear, to crawl into the walls of the old houses I restored, and never come out. Jenna came over the night after the wedding, bringing takeout and a bottle of wine. She didn't ask questions, just sat with me on the couch, our knees touching, the TV muted in the background. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clink of forks against takeout containers. Finally, she spoke. "You did the right thing, Anna. You set a boundary. That's not easy." I stared at my food, appetite gone. "It doesn't feel like the right thing. It feels like I abandoned them." Jenna shook her head. "You didn't abandon anyone. They made their choices. You just stopped letting them hurt you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let go of the guilt, the sense that I'd failed somehow. But years of being the fixer, the responsible one, don't disappear overnight. The next morning, my father showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't answer the door, but something in his voice, when he called my name, made me pause. He looked older, smaller, as if the weight of the past week had carved new lines into his face. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice rough. I nodded, stepping aside. He stood in my living room, looking everywhere but at me. "Your mother's not doing well," he said finally. "Lila's staying with her. She won't talk to anyone." I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "What do you want me to do about it?" He winced. "I don't know, I thought you should know." We stood in silence, the distance between us wider than ever. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, Anna, for everything. We should have invited you. We should have. I don't know. Tried harder." I wanted to yell, to list every slight, every time I'd been overlooked or taken for granted. But I was tired. Tired of fighting for scraps of affection. Tired of explaining why I deserved to be treated like family. "I appreciate the apology," I said quietly. "But it doesn't change what happened." He nodded, shoulders slumping. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." After he left, I sat on the floor, back against the couch, and let myself cry. Not for the wedding, not for the viral video, but for all the years I'd spent trying to earn a place in a family that never really saw me. The days blurred together. I went to work, came home, avoided social media. Jenna checked in every day, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just sitting with me in silence. Marcus sent texts, little jokes, and memes to make me smile. Slowly, the ache in my chest began to fade, replaced by something quieter, steadier. One evening, as I was sanding a window frame at the Whitaker house, my phone buzzed. It was Lila. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. but curiosity, and maybe a sliver of hope. Won out. Anna. Her voice was small, shaky. Hey, I said, keeping my tone neutral. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. I should have invited you. I should have, I don't know, been a better sister. I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. It's not just about the wedding, Lila. It's about everything. All the times I was there for you, and you never even noticed, she sniffled. I know, I was selfish. I let Mom and Ben convince me that you just make things harder. But the truth is, I was jealous. You always had your life together. I felt like I was always messing up, and you were always there to fix it. I let out a shaky breath. I didn't want to fix everything. I just wanted to be your sister. We sat in silence, the years of hurt stretching between us. Finally, Lila spoke. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I can. I thought about all the times I'd rushed in to save her, to smooth things over, to make everything okay. I realized I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted something different, something honest. I don't know either, I said. But maybe we can start by being honest with each other. No more pretending. No more fixing, she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay. After we hung up, I felt lighter. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. For the first time, I believed that maybe things could be different. A week passed. The news cycle moved on. The video faded from the headlines, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. I focused on my work, on my friends, on the small joys that made each day bearable. I started going for walks again, letting the city's energy fill the spaces my family had left empty. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Henderson in the hallway. She pressed a loaf of banana bread into my hands, her eyes kind. You're a good person, Anna. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. I smiled, the warmth of her words lingering long after she'd gone. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkle against the darkening sky. I thought about everything that had happened, the exclusion, the viral video, the painful conversations. I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my family to change. I was changing. I was choosing myself. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, the city still wrapped in a hush. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky shift from indigo to pale blue. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt clear. I realized I'd been holding my breath, waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next apology that never came. But now there was only quiet, and in that quiet, I found a strange kind of hope. I decided to visit the Whitaker house early, before the contractors arrived. The old place was still and shadowed, dust motes swirling in the beams of morning light. I ran my hand along the banister, feeling the grooves worn by 100 years of hands. Restoration was slow, patient work, scraping away the damage, layer by layer, until the beauty underneath revealed itself. I wondered if healing from family hurt was the same. As I worked, my thoughts drifted to Lila. I wondered how she was coping, if she was eating, if she was sleeping. I wondered if she'd ever forgive herself for what happened, or if she'd carry the shame like a stone in her pocket, the way I'd carried my own for so long. I thought about calling her, but stopped myself. She needed space, and so did I. By mid-morning, the contractors arrived, filling the house with the sounds of hammers and laughter. I lost myself in the rhythm of work, the satisfaction of progress measured in inches and hours. For a while, I forgot about the wedding, the video, the ache in my chest. I was just Anna, the woman who could bring old things back to life. At lunch, I sat on the porch steps, eating a sandwich and watching the world go by. A little girl rode past on her bike, her father jogging behind her, both of them laughing. I felt a pang of longing, not for a different family, but for a different version of myself, one who didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole. My phone buzzed. A message from Jenna. Dinner tonight, my treat. I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. That evening, we met at our favorite Thai place, the one with the mismatched chairs and the best green curry in the city. Jenna listened as I told her about the call with Lila, about the apology, about the strange sense of relief that had settled over me. You're allowed to feel better, you know, she said, squeezing my hand. You're allowed to move on. I nodded, letting her words sink in. I know. It just feels new, like I'm learning how to breathe again. After dinner, we walked through the city, the air cool and sweet. We talked about everything and nothing: work, books, the best places to get coffee. For the first time in a long time, I felt present, not haunted by the past or anxious about the future. When I got home, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's, looping and careful. I hesitated before opening it, bracing myself for guilt, for blame, for another plea to come back and fix what was broken. But the letter was different. It was short, almost hesitant. Anna, I'm sorry for how things turned out. I know I hurt you. I wish I could take it back. I hope you find happiness, even if it's not with us. Love. Mom. I read it twice, then set it on the kitchen counter. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. The next day, I called Lila. She answered on the first ring. Hey, she said, her voice steadier than before. Hey, how are you? She hesitated. Better. I'm seeing a therapist. Mom's still a mess, but I'm trying to focus on the kids. They're confused, but they're resilient. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's good. I'm glad you're getting help. We talked for a while, about nothing and everything. She told me about Emma's new obsession with dinosaurs, about Lucas learning to ride his bike. I told her about the Whitaker house, about the satisfaction of restoring something everyone else had given up on. Before we hung up, Lila said, I miss you, Anna. I know I don't deserve it, but I do. I swallowed hard. I miss you too. Maybe we can start over, not as fixer and mess, but as sisters. She laughed, a real laugh, the first I'd heard in years. I'd like that. After the call, I sat in the quiet, feeling the old wounds begin to close. Not healed, not forgotten, but no longer bleeding. A week later, I got a call from Marcus. Hey, I have an extra ticket to the art show at the museum. Want to come? I hesitated, then said yes. The night of the show, I dressed up, put on lipstick, and let myself feel excited. The museum was crowded, the air buzzing with conversation and the scent of wine. Marcus introduced me to his friends, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I laughed, I listened, I let myself be seen. After the show, Marcus and I walked through the city, the lights reflecting off the wet pavement. He told me about his own family, about the ways he'd learned to set boundaries, to choose himself. I realized I wasn't alone. There were others like me, people who'd been hurt, who'd learned to heal, who'd found their own way forward. When I got home that night, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. I thought about the woman I was becoming, stronger, softer, unafraid to take up space. For the first time, I believed I deserved to be happy, not because I'd earned it, not because I'd fixed anyone else's mess, but simply because I was enough. The days grew longer, the city shifting from the cool blush of spring into the slow golden heat of summer. I found myself waking up with the sun, drawn to the quiet promise of early mornings. My routines became rituals. Coffee on the balcony, a walk through the neighborhood, the gentle hum of a life that was finally quietly my own. One Saturday, I decided to visit my parents' house. I hadn't been back since before the wedding, and the thought of returning filled me with a strange mix of dread and nostalgia. I drove the familiar streets, past the park where Lila and I used to play, past the bakery that had closed years ago, past the houses that had watched me grow up. The old maple tree in the front yard was bigger than I remembered, its branches heavy with leaves. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. Closure, maybe. Or just a sense that I could walk through the door and not feel like a stranger. I took a deep breath and got out, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The house looked the same, but smaller somehow. I rang the bell, and after a long pause, my mother opened the door. She looked older, her hair streaked with more grey, her eyes tired. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. "Anna," she said, her voice soft. "Hi, Mom." She stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee, the way it always had. My father was in the kitchen, reading the paper. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Anna," he said, standing. "It's good to see you." We sat at the kitchen table, the three of us, the silence awkward but not hostile. My mother poured coffee, her hands trembling slightly. I looked around, noticing the little changes. The new curtains, the photos on the fridge, the empty chair where Lila used to sit with the kids. We talked about small things at first. The weather, the garden, the neighbors. My father asked about my work, and I told him about the Whitaker house, about the satisfaction of restoring something everyone else had given up on. My mother listened, her eyes shining with something like pride. Finally, she reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "I'm sorry, Anna, for everything. I know I can't fix what happened, but I want you to know I regret it. I regret hurting you." I squeezed her hand, feeling the old anger loosen its grip. "I know, Mom. I'm not here for an apology. I just wanted to see you, to see if we could start again." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. My father cleared his throat, his voice rough. "We want you in our lives, Anna. We always have. We just didn't know how to show it." I smiled, the tension in my chest easing. "I'm here now. That's enough." We spent the afternoon together, talking, laughing, remembering. It wasn't perfect. There were still things we didn't say, wounds that would take time to heal. But it was a start. As I drove home, the sun setting behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or pretending nothing had happened. It was about letting go of the hope for a better past and choosing to build a better future. That night, Lila called. She sounded stronger, more herself. "I got a new job," she said, excitement in her voice. "It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I'm doing it on my own." I grinned, pride swelling in my chest. "I'm happy for you, Lila. Really," she hesitated. "Do you think we'll ever be close again?" I thought about it, about all the years of hurt and misunderstanding, about the ways we'd both changed. "I think we can try. That's all we can do." We made plans to meet for coffee, just the two of us. No expectations, no old roles to fall back into. Just sisters, starting over. The next weekend, we met at a little cafe downtown. Lila looked different, tired but determined. We talked for hours, about work, about the kids, about the future. We laughed, we cried. We remembered who we used to be and imagined who we could become. As we hugged goodbye, I felt something shift inside me. The old pain was still there, but it didn't define me anymore. I was more than the fixer, more than the forgotten sister. I was Anna, strong, resilient, whole. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reaching out more, to friends, to family, to the world around me. I volunteered at a local shelter, started a book club, took a pottery class just because it made me happy. I let myself be seen, not for what I could do for others, but for who I was. One evening, as I walked home from the pottery studio, the city alive with the sounds of summer, I realized I was no longer waiting for someone to invite me in. I was already home, in my own life, on my own terms. I paused on the bridge over the river, Watching the water catch the last light of day, I thought about everything that had happened: the exclusion, the pain, the viral video, the slow, steady work of healing. I thought about the woman I'd become and the life I was building, one choice at a time. I took a deep breath, the air warm and sweet, and smiled. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. I was here, and I was enough.